Hi there, welcome to FMCG by Alex. My name is Alex, and today I would like to talk to you about AI in FMCG sales. So, how does AI actually influence FMCG sales, and how can we make it better with the use of AI? Now, there's a lot of buzz, of course, about AI. A lot of companies are working with AI, and it's like if you don't work with AI, you are somewhere in the Stone Age. Now, that's not true, of course. You can perfectly run a company without it, but it can be so much better and so much of a convenience to work with AI. So let's just start with how FMCG companies in sales actually would benefit from this. So the innovation there would be, for example, in mapping, routing, and estimating demand. So at this moment, you basically have an example where when I started my career in FMCG, we had a guy from Coca-Cola who's basically dusted off a manual, really like the dust was on the manual from 1974, and since 1974, nothing changed in the way they worked with regards to sales and distribution. Now, in essence, it's very simple. It was back then, of course, all manual. Computers were not existed, but were not mainstream. Basically, we're still filling a room. Later on, personal computers, and of course, handhelds were actually the next step. Nowadays, everything is done with a cell phone. So in the end, those are the universal devices. Back also with watches, obviously taking over that particular role. But let's say you need to basically have the old-fashioned way of mapping and routing, meaning like you have a salesman who needs to visit stores. How many stores per day? What is the optimum number? How do you actually check whether they really do what you ask them to do and the route without actually wanting to invade all any privacy laws, like where you basically Big Brother is watching you, checking up on people whether they are really where they say they are, or whether they actually take things a bit slower. Yeah, that's also part of a big discussion here in Europe, maybe in Asia a bit less. US might also be an issue. So, having said that, the original way of working was, and still is in most cases, you basically have a route based on historical mapping. So you have, okay, this is where all the stores are. You take a route that you need to map out on, old-fashioned map on the wall. So if you look at most of the distribution offices that cater to, for example, general trade in Asia, Indonesia, you will basically look at a wall where there is a map of a city, and they have a lot of dots where representing the stores, and then pieces of string or drawn routes basically for people that visit those stores. Route A, Route B, Route C. Now, this is all based on experience. So basically, people are using best judgment from the little computer that we call our mind. And yeah, so many years this works, therefore I do it like this. Now, based on that, you route, like routing is basically the optimal route. So you have already with, I think I've done a video on this before, but mapping and routing, you have a way where you try to make your route most optimal. So if you go from point A west of the city and you have to travel an hour to point B, and then you have to go back an hour to point C, that's not a very optimal route. So you're trying to ideally have one street of all stores, basically, where you have people visiting all these stores, basically, or at least something that's reminiscing that. And at the end of the day, they need to visit X number of stores, depending a bit on the industry. But let's say 30 you need to visit, and you need to actually sell to 20. Now, when you sell to those stores, obviously, the estimating of demand is very important. So normally you associate, that's maybe very simplistic thinking, when you say, oh, a salesman who manages to sell as much as possible in every store is a good salesman. So that might be true today, but you also need to go there in 2 weeks' time, and if the store is still really stuck to the rim with product because you overestimated the demand, then that store will not be happy. Store, you will not get paid. The store owner will not be happy. You will not get paid, and in essence, you will not sell anything that week. That's why you, from the best salesman in the company, you become the worst salesman in the company. So, estimating demand. A good salesman is actually estimating demand if I come back to the store in about 2 weeks' time, there should be, when I put in 10, there should be one or two left. So it should not be zero, because that means I underestimated demand, but you should not actually overestimate the demand by too much. There's only one or two left out of 10. Yeah, you basically have done a good job. So if more than half is left, normally the store will say, "Oh, no, 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 come back next time, because the sales per day are not enough." Then I don't want to spend more money investing in stock that doesn't move. So that is basically for you. And of course, not getting paid is not a good idea for an FMCG company. Now, this is historical data. So this historical data, in essence, should be captured by AI. In essence, you're looking at what do you capture, basically. So in some cases, it's stored in a system. So a system that is company-wide is that what to do with the data. Normally, big data is actually the holy grail for a lot of companies, but a lot of companies capture the data. Then it's still human interpretation of what the data means, and actually to distill it. So we have a good brain, don't get me wrong, but and experienced people can probably see patterns in data more quickly. But in essence, this historical data can be multiple years of how sales developed. And that's basically how you can see trends. Now, what AI can do is, of course, distill this into bite-sized pieces where it also analyzes some of the trends, basically. And still, it needs a human eye or a human brain, in essence, to someone with experience to know what the data is. Because, in essence, AI, like ChatGPT, is a language model. So that is actually generative AI that can still uh, do amazing things, but it's as good as the input. So it's just like a computer is as good as what you put into it. That's something that you should always remember, that it needs skilled people also to make sense of the data and act on it, because that's what AI cannot yet, at least. Then, of course, apart from generative AI, you would have predictive AI, which is actually where the historical data comes in. So the limitation of predictive AI is that it's really limited to the information that is available. So that can always be biased. So let's say there is a complete shift in economic situation where the predictive AI still says, no, no, in the past there was a trend like this, therefore the trend is like that. While there are a lot of different changes in the environment, basically, that could change it. So AI will basically look at also the geography and seasonality, etc. So these are the variables that have not been included in the entire historical data, but that's something you can input as well. Automatically, this also means that there, of course, are limitations on new product launch, because you don't have the historical data when new products are launched. So actually the history is zero, because the product might actually seem like another product, but it's, of course, in some cases very innovative and new. So if you look at comparable launches, say, okay, we have a product that looks like or feels like or seems like, that is normally a way to work that into historical data, basically, at least to create a model to predict it. Now, of course, you have better performance visibility. That is a result of it. So, in essence, you look at whether salespeople are, productive, doing the things they need to do, the checklist that they need to do in the store. Of course, you have productivity. They will sell more. In essence, an easy 10-20% gain in productivity is possibly, with the advent of AI, is quite within reach. And of course, it needs to be integrated in existing POS systems. So if you look at the system of the distributor, how they already capture the data. So the data is usually already captured, but how to interpret it, that's where the AI model comes in. So that's actually a very interesting thing. So if you look at currently, of course, the first steps are taken with working AI into these systems, basically. And I think one of the most important benefits of it all is, of course, that you reduce stockouts. Because let's face it, this example I just gave is, if you sell 10 units into a store, and you want to be conservative, because too much stock is actually bad. Too much equals bad. Then you want to make sure that, of course, there is at least one or two left. Now, Problem is that if you are too conservative about it, then safe. Okay, I'm just only selling in five because and then at some point halfway through the 2 week cycle, these five are sold, so is no stock inside these stores. Now, FMCG is doesn't work in a way that I did not buy one today, so I will buy two tomorrow. That is actually not the way consumers are doing it. So therefore, if you fail to actually capture the demand, so let's say the point of sale that you have, the outlet that you have, doesn't have the product available, that's lost sales. So that is something that stockouts you should avoid at any given at all cost. But of course, putting too much stock in, like I said, that's a cost you will want to incur, and B, psychologically it works very poorly on outlet owners. Outlet owners will easily think like, oh, you sold in 10, I still have 7 or 8 left, and therefore your product is simply not moving. Had you only sold in 4 or 5 units and you had 2 left out of 5, or 2 left out of 4, yeah, that would have been 50% of what you sold in. So there might have been a reorder, otherwise not. So this is actually something that, psychologically, because again, store owners don't use AI yet for that. They still use this computer that is their brain. Therefore, psychologically, they are reluctant to invest more unless they see, for their feeling, stock is selling. Now, I've had a very nice example of this. That is actually, we're talking about early this century when I sold into toy stores. I had a computer games range I sold on CD-ROM, basically. So it's units, DVD cases with a CD inside. I'm old, I know, but the product was sold into various chains, but also various independent retailers. Now, an independent retailer once invited me, said, okay, can you sell to me? Okay, fine, give me 5 units of each. So I had a range of like 100 titles or something, so 500 CDs I sold to him. And with right of return, so in anything unsold could return. The point was that he said, "Oh, this is the worst selling." After like 2 3 weeks, he was calling me. This is the worst selling range of product I've ever had. I said, "Oh, why is it?" Every single time I go to the stock room, I see your product on the shelf and it's not moving. So basically, he had part of it in the store because the facings maybe 2 3, and he needed to have like 2 3 in the stock room basically to replenish. So the some point is okay. Let me come by and just we'll take back what is unsold if you don't want to sell it anymore. So like in essence, if someone has decided he doesn't want your product anymore, there's no use of making a big argument or big fuss about it. At some point, people are that's just reluctant to do it. You will not get the full energy. So I went there, and then at some point we tallied up the sales, which is all manual. We're talking about really early this century, early 2000s, basically. So to our amazement, out of 500, we sold 350 units. So in the end, it was probably the best-selling range of product that he ever had. It's just that, 150 units that was still in his stockroom, basically. Like it's some of the stuff was actually not being replenished inside his real in his store. So that was actually the interesting thing, that perception can really be like that. And because I was an external supplier, of course, he did not have me in his system as per product. He had just like CD-ROMs with one price basically for this range basically, and so anything he scanned was just this is a game of like €5 or €10 that I have sold basically. So not looking at SKU level replenishment. Now again, this is not FMCG, but this is a good example, I think, of how a lack of data, so data is actually lagging in this case, and perception. So you have basically just your gut feeling. Your gut feeling is wrong in this case. But so in the end, also he stopped selling because I said, "Oh, look, this is actually the data." But of course, people don't want to be told they're wrong. Therefore, he was stubborn about it and didn't want to restock it anymore. So it's okay. Then we're fine, and I'll just take it back, and we don't do business anymore. But so in the end, this was an interesting, yeah, interesting experience basically, where this really I connect to how AI in that sense, could make some real time suggestions in that sense of like, okay, what is the ideal stock level for something like that? I should not have started with five per unit, five per product maybe, but you should actually have gone with less and maybe had your delivery guy go there one more time with a restock. So that is basically the thing I've learned the hard way. But again, these predictive AI systems actually could help optimize that and have that sort of just in time algorithm where you say, okay, when do you need the stock and how much sales would be, rather than best estimates from a salesman who is doing visual confirmation in that sense. So how would this work in practice? So if you look at it there, it's a bit of a recap of what we just discussed. But if you look at, in essence, AI can optimize the daily sales routes. So basically on real-time performance. So data is good when you capture it, but actually if you analyze it afterwards, it's mouth to mouth to a dead guy because the guy is already dead. Why would you give mouth to mouth resuscitation if the data shows a trend that is unfavorable or needs adjustment? So real-time data is and real-time analysis is actually something that you can do in this case. You can just prompt the AI, in this case the predictive AI, to spit out whatever report you need from it in order to make your judgment, make your analysis, and actually make the decision to change or tweak or adjust something basically. Now, it will also basically take into account location, traffic, any inventory gaps, and of course the historical sales. So in the end, that is basically something that you really can make work for you in terms of daily sales route optimization. Then, of course, it will recommend what to sell per outlet based on SKU movement data, on current stock levels, also from previous visits or POS integrations. Then anything with regards to promotions or new launches, like I mentioned, it's a bit tricky, but in essence, and then predictive reorder needs using AI. So it takes away, the human error in this case, where you say it still needs a human at the helm because sometimes when you say historical data, which is actually a very interesting fact, probably that there was a large retailer used to be one of our best customers when I was working in Indonesia for a large dairy manufacturer. So they were actually selling huge numbers of product basically a month, and at some point we saw the trend going down, 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 down. So there was apparently a payment problem. So the payment problem actually led to us holding the replenishment, so the stock out. So problem was that that company uses a system in order to predict the replenishment. It was already, we're talking about 15, maybe 20 years ago, where you basically look at how they use the system, where they started using the system. So 15 years ago when I was, getting the bad end of it, so to speak. So we went there for visual confirmation. Look, this is stock is out. So, and every single time they say, okay, because the historical sales were low, because there was no replenishment, there was no reorder prompted. So in the end, the sales went down because also the stock on the shelf went down. So you're talking about demand inside the store was much greater. Historically, for us, it was maybe like around 1 billion rupiah, which is at that time was I think $75,000 basically in terms of sales, and it dropped down to like $10,000-15,000 of sales basically. So you're looking at a huge gap, which at some point, my predecessor at that time was probably had looked at it, but maybe was unable to really go there and visually confirm at that time. So um, when we went there and we discussed it, so we saw, okay, let's go over to manual, like, okay, let's make a pipeline order and really fill it up again and then see what happens. So in the end, it's just unfortunate that retail chain was in financial difficulty. We'll not mention who it was, of course, but financial difficulty where they were constantly having stockouts because of the fact that they were unable to pay